Thank you for joining us, everyone. Today, we're honored to sit down with Jeremy Kauffman. He's the CEO of LBRY. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeremy.
It's great to be here with you, Justin.
Great. So, LBRY creates a decentralized market for content and other information. Could you talk about the germ of that idea or the seed of that idea, and also why you think it's so important?
Sure. Yeah. I'll take the second part of it first. And to explain the germ, there's a question of how nerdy I'm allowed to get. But I'll talk about why it's important because this is something that everyone can appreciate, nerd or not, right? And especially if you're someone who already gets Bitcoin because it's partially the same principle. But you don't even need to get Bitcoin. You don't need to get any of it, right? Which is that do you want someone else to have the keys to really to you, to what you create, to what you are, to have the ability to reach in to your computer, your hard drive, to control what you create, what you share, what you make. Bitcoin is the same proposition for money. Do you want someone else to have access to your money? Or you're giving people the ability to have that full control if they want it. Maybe you have the full control, but you choose to trust another party. But it's about putting that choice back in your hands. And I think there are a lot of people right now who are becoming more and more aware, more and more concerned about the behavior of platforms like Google, Facebook, Amazon, in terms of how they treat the people who publish, treat the people who are really putting them into business. Do they treat them fairly? Do they treat them right? Or do they treat them capriciously, arbitrarily? Do they abuse them, exploit them, etc.? I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that it's the latter. And that actually ties nicely into the first question, which is, why did we want to create LBRY? I'm someone who has always been a proponent. It's a good way of putting it. So I kind of feel like I'm like a child of the internet, the early days of the internet. I'm in my mid 30s and I had a computer at a pretty young age. And my parents were very good, but one of the things that made them good is they got me a computer and let me go on the internet. And I learned all this stuff. And it was kind of this, like weird, interesting, world where you could get all kinds of perspectives. I remember as a young kid being exposed to just this real diversity of opinion and thought that I wasn't getting in school. It came from the internet. And I see it going in the wrong direction right now. And I saw it going in the wrong direction years ago. And I saw this possibility to improve on sort of the state of the art of the tech, via blockchain. I'm a nerd, right? I came at this from much more from a computer science perspective than a business perspective at first, which is, what could we do here? How could we use this technology to improve the state of the art? And so ultimately, when we settled on the design for LBRY, we tried to come up with a design that could, as a decentralized open standard, provide the discovery, distribution, and purchase of digital content, essentially to make YouTube and Amazon-like services possible, but without needing to trust that one company. So, yeah, that's the gist.
I think there's a lot of efforts right now to rethink the monetization aspect of the internet. Bitcoin was originally called the currency of the internet, or some people called it that, but it never really like sort of integrated into our daily lives in the digital settings, like some of the experiments post Bitcoin or after Bitcoin's founding, AB, if you will, after Bitcoin, have attempted. So, like some platforms come to mind, LBRY being one of them. So, could you talk about this monetization aspect and why, for people who are maybe unfamiliar with alternatives to, for instance, YouTube, this is so significant?
Yeah. So let's talk about the monetization first. And I actually think so. YouTube's not great. It's bigger than YouTube. And actually, when we were conceiving the company, the truth is we didn't even see us as much as a YouTube competitor as we saw ourselves as an Amazon competitor. Because you look at something like Amazon, you sell an ebook, and it's or a video file, and they're taking $3, 30%, you know, to move a file from place A to place B. It's kind of wild, right? Like that's an insane margin to be getting as a middleman, to provide this service where the marginal cost of you providing the service is pretty close to zero. Okay, pretty close to zero. And so I saw there as being a huge. I did see there as being an entrepreneurial opportunity here in terms of the ability to undercut that, right? And it turned out that there were a lot of problems with YouTube, ranging from everyone from anyone who follows blockchain creators on YouTube has seen it, but bigger stuff than that. I mean, YouTube demonetizes LGBTQ content. YouTube is in the pocket of the big video game publishers and cracks down on video game creators who are critical of games all of the time. And they admitted recently that they prioritize content that their viewers explicitly don't like. So they said that they push content from mainstream media. I mean, CNN. They push this stuff on purpose, even though their metrics show that users don't like it because they think it's important. I mean, it's just crazy. They have this. There's been some sort of cultural capture or something that's going on at these companies that they feel like they need to be the parent, the authoritarian, and people don't deserve the right to choose for themselves. It's very against my ethics. It's very against the ethics of people work on LBRY, and I think a lot of people don't like it. I mean, who wants to be nannied in this way? And that's a really big part of why I think LBRY is important. And that gets into the monetization as well. Like it's the same kind of thing, and I think it's the same thing actually driving both the nannying and the profit cut, right? Which is that they feel that they own the entire situation, that there's no ability to escape, there's no ability to get off. I mean, that's why they do these things. That's why they're able to take such large profit margins. It's why they're able to act in these ways, and your people and people stay on. People feel that they're trapped, and so we hope with LBRY we're giving some of these people a way out.
It's crazy how in the last couple months it's really come to the forefront how much of the U in YouTube has been lost over the years. Have you seen kind of the same thing? And like,
Yeah. I mean, YouTube. I mean, and it's not. This stuff is like. This isn't. I would argue that this is effective in terms of. Hey, look. If we're doing fact checks, this is in the land of facts. This might have been something that was conspiratorial a couple of years ago or something like this. If you follow organization I strongly recommend following is to follow Reclaim the Net. They do some of the best reporting on subject matter in this area. And among the things, so they're the source of this story I said where they prioritize mainstream content. Another thing that YouTube was documented doing is they have internally assigned quality scores, human assigned quality scores. Okay. So this is completely, if you talk about a trending algorithm, typically what people talk about when a trending algorithm is you've created an algorithm that says, well, just how much is this deviating from the trend, the expected behavior? And so when something is at the top of trending, it's doing, in some way better than everything else. Well, YouTube says that's not enough. That actually shows people too much stuff from ordinary people, from the average creator. So they specifically updated their system. So not just the mainstream media content, they've assigned internal scores to all kinds of content. And some of this stuff got leaked and documented by this organization, Reclaim the Net. And so the organizations that they've given the highest scores to, it's nothing but like corporate news, super vanilla, that sort of you in YouTube stuff. I mean, they're explicitly trying to not push it. That may have been how they started, but that era is over. It is dead.
could you talk about some of the lineage that led up into LBRY? I see that you've mentioned in the past Bitcoin and BitTorrent. I always did see Bitcoin as sort of the kin of BitTorrent. Could you kind of speak of this like distributed history of the
Yeah.
internet that's really kind of been buried in some ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could probably talk about that for about a half an hour if we're just talking about like history of the internet and decentralization and these kinds of things. So I'll try to make some narrower, more cogent points here. If I can do that, we'll see. If you follow me on Twitter, it's my full name. I think it's my pinned tweet right now. Is this conversation between Julian Assange and Eric Schmidt, and Assange being Assange, he published the whole conversation afterwards. So I had probably learned about Bitcoin and started using it a little bit before me reading this conversation, and I don't think I read the conversation like right when it came out, but not too long after. I can actually pinpoint it. I could, if I pull up my calendar, pinpoint the exact date because it's a family event. But we're talking about at this point around 6 years ago. Okay, and when I first started thinking about this stuff, and so thinking about a blockchain, what is it? First and foremost, it's a database, right? Like, and it's a spread, it's a spreadsheet. If you don't know what a database is, for it to be being reductive and losing some things, it's not. You can do all kinds of things with this. What's novel about it is we never had a database that wasn't owned by one party, and so we have BitTorrent at the same time. BitTorrent exists as this technology. BitTorrent works. It works well. It's to this day a substantial portion of the internet. It's one of the most successful decentralized technologies to ever exist. But it had some flaws. And those flaws are discovery. There's no list of what's on the network that's decentralized. Incentives. Content tends to age out, and it basically is entirely relying on people being good, which I'm not opposed to. Rely on people being good, and sometimes that works. BitTorrent does work. Wikipedia works. Traffic works. I'm all for relying on people being good, but add a little incentive. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And then I think possibly the biggest problem, this one or the first one, is legitimacy. I mean, BitTorrent may have been wonderful technologically, and it may have been wonderful from a certain freedom aspect. A lot of creators don't think BitTorrent is wonderful. A lot of creators have a lot of problems with BitTorrent. It's funny as someone who goes around talking about this technology, but BitTorrent is one of these words that gets very, very different reactions depending on who you're talking to. If I go in and talk to, a content studio, BitTorrent's not a nice word. If I go in and talk to a bunch of nerds, BitTorrent's great, So BitTorrent clearly did not work for everyone. And so I think a blockchain, which I would agree is a sort of sibling technology to BitTorrent, does a different thing, but definitely some similar properties. A blockchain can solve all these things. All right, a blockchain is a database. Boom, I've got my discovery layer. Okay, I've got the ability to have a coherent view of the network. I've got a token now that I can work with. I can use that token to incentivize good behavior, right? So don't just be a nice person, earn a little bit for being a good person. And then because coming back to other things you can do with that blockchain, you can provide identity, right? So you can have, BitTorrent doesn't have this. I can't have a channel on BitTorrent and be followed and get notifications when someone I follow publishes something new. These are all things that you need in the content world that BitTorrent can't provide. But now we have identity. Now we have payments. Now we can serve legitimate monetization use cases, right? Now we can serve everybody, and this is true in terms of the library content. Like the truth is, there is a lot of content on BitTorrent that's infringing. There's not a lot of content on library that's infringing. The vast majority of content on library is completely legitimate, and that's because that identity and monetization aspect is much more appealing to legitimate creators.
Could you discuss, like, now with everyone sort of working from home, and we see a lot of big companies now shifting their workforces to a work from home environment, the importance of these alternative kind of alternatives to the YouTubes of the world, etc., especially in light of kind of the censorship aspects that many people are starting to see, in which YouTube, for example, is going to be favoring kind of sort of the stuff we normally associate with television. So like Jimmy Fallon over, a YouTuber, if you will. And then, so
we can call them librarians now, if we need it.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
to work.
yeah, exactly. Librarians. So like, um, especially like in terms of library, but also like touching a little bit on like the BitTorrents and the Bitcoins moving forward. So like, what are the importance of these platforms as everyone kind of shifts to work from home?
Yeah, so I think there will definitely, as all this stuff shakes out, we will see more work from home, and I think it's mainly just an accelerant of trends that were already somewhat there. So I think it accelerates things, and also because it's the term for these kinds of moments. It's like that saying that sometimes a few weeks is a few years, and vice versa. Right? Like there's these moments of extreme importance, right? These are times when people change their behavior, they change their habits, they're open to doing new things, they get, shook out of being in some kind of rut, some kind of local maximum or local minimum. They get shook out to somewhere else, right? That's part of what these events do, and that's part of why we end up in a different configuration at the end, because it's like the equivalent of like just putting a bunch of energy into a system, and things end up in different places. That's a kind of weird way of looking at it, perhaps, but I think that's part of what's going on. And I think this is going to happen anyway. The nature of, I guess this is kind of a grander argument to make, but I think it's part of what LBRY is a part of, and I think it's part of what's going on here, which is all centralized technology ends up being partially hostile to the people who use it. Okay, it's once you have, with the centralized technology, once you have cornered the market, you have a business incentive to basically make your product worse to make more money, right? I mean, this is always true, right? Like no one wants to see an advertisement, right? So every advertisement that is ever being shown that's above the sort of like cost required to provide the service, in economic terms, this would be called a rent. This rent is extracted from capturing. By the way, I hope your audience is econ nerds, and if not, I'm like just ruining this whole podcast. But
no, please.
this extra money that's being earned, it's only good for the company. It's not good for the creator, right? It's not good for the viewer. Example, it's not just ads. And another example of a sort of rent collection that happens, right? YouTube disabling the ability to not alt tab on mobile, switch windows and have the video keep playing, background play. They disabled background play, right? That's a rent. The fact that they're able to do that and get away with it, right? They shouldn't be able to do that. They can only get away with it from their essentially, I don't want to call them a monopoly, but dominant market power. Okay, so I think that centralization always creates this. Is why in Windows, you have an advertisement. You paid for the software. There's an advertisement. Well, why? You're stuck on Windows, right? That's what they think. So we can just put ads in the software for you now. Okay, so I think that, and previously, so what's different? What's the alternative? Okay, the alternative is open source. Truth is, open source kind of sucks a lot of the times. Right? I'm the kind of guy who hates the ad in Windows so much that I do run Linux. But I can't at the same time always be a full-throated Linux supporter. Do think Linux has gotten much better. Obviously, 2020 will finally be the year of Linux desktop, but it's not for everyone. It's sort of it's the stick shift. It's people who want more control, but you've got to sacrifice some things. And I think that is true even today. Although I think a lot of people could get by on Linux just fine and probably should try it. But it is, at the same time, I think true that you're sacrificing some things to use Linux. With these sort of tokenized Web 3.0 protocols, which LBRY is in the family of, I think that we do have the potential to change the dynamic. So now we can have an open source tech that can compete even stronger on product quality because there is an ability to monetize the creation of the software or the service. And even more importantly, the incentive is even more strongly aligned. Like the incentive for the centralized services, the incentive is aligned at first. YouTube in 2009 was great. Windows in earlier eras did actually try harder. It might have been worse software overall because it's buggy or whatever, but it tried harder. It wasn't doing these things that made your experience worse so that they could make more money. It wasn't doing that to the same extent, right? Hopefully, the hope is, this is still an open question, right? I think it's true, but it is still an open question. The hope is open tech combined with this tokenized monetization aligned to the incentives, and the incentives stay aligned, much more closely aligned, so that we're never incentivized to become the evil party. And part of that incentive comes from, if we do become evil, the so-called exit rights, the ability to leave, are much larger in this open land than they are in the other land. And I'm going to wrap it up, but just one more thing to crystallize that analogy. You could look at email. I don't think email will become as evil of a service as like Facebook or YouTube will become, because there is a much easier way to get out. Yes, you have a lot committed to your Gmail address or whatever, but you can get out in a way that you can't really like get out of Facebook and still use Facebook. You can get out of Gmail and still talk to everyone. And so this is an example of how like an open system provides a quality check and stops the company from making the service as bad. This is also why Google really wants to find a way of like making Inbox or some other tool so they can really capture you and start cranking that jerk monetization dial once they've captured you a little bit more, right? So I think I hopefully answered that question coherently. I don't know if I just gave a rant that I wanted to give, but I think that's a big part of what's going on.
No, I find it fascinating, and I have a migration away from Gmail in my not so distant future, and I don't look forward to it.
Yeah, you don't look forward to it, but you can do it like that, and
Hmm.
even that I think makes Gmail a. I still use. I'll be honest. I probably like shouldn't say this as a library CEO, but like I still use Google products. I like a lot of Google products are really good. You know, our company, we're doing product work. I think we've got some good product people at this company, but I'd be lying if we don't pull up what Google is doing and check out their product work. Like a lot of what they do is good. I just think that some of what they do is also pretty jerky and bad.
It was easy for me to move away from Google Docs, for instance, compared
Yeah.
to how easy it will be for me to move away from Gmail. And part of it was I was thinking like I write a lot. That's pretty much my main vocation. And I was like, man, Google knows like every single thought I'm having throughout the entire day, pretty much. And so I migrated to LibreOffice, which has been great. I'm curious, could you talk about tokenization, library credits, especially for people who maybe are not so familiar with them, and what that future might look like and where library credits fit into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I'll just emphasize though, if you just like the idea of a YouTube type experience that's just more respectful, and in general software that's more respectful, you can go to lbry.tv, you can create an account, and you can just start watching some cool stuff. And you don't need to understand anything about anything else that I'm going to talk about. Okay. Because I do think this is a mistake that I think the blockchain community makes that we're trying, not ever, but some, that we're trying not to make, is that they do emphasize the technology and the token too much. And to me, these things exist to solve problems, right? A lot of people, most people, don't want to know how their car works, and they'd prefer if the internals of the engine were not leaked to them, and they press the button and they turn the wheel and it does what they want, right? You know, they don't care about the science or the tech, and that's the right opinion to have. There's no criticism intended. And you know, so that said, we've tried to design library experiences in that vein. The token is a key part of it, though. Okay, and so here's how the token works. You need a little bit of the token to publish. We'll give you some for free. It costs very, very little to publish. You know, I'm talking about pennies giving you hundreds of publishes. But because we are dealing with a blockchain, it does have to cost a little bit. If you want to use paid content, the token is also used for that. So you can do paid content on library. Okay, so if you want to buy, you can buy films. There's some films from Oscilloscope Laboratories. We just did a whole series of paid content to celebrate the paid content launch on LBRY.tv. And so we got a whole blog post up. I mean, dozens and dozens, hundreds probably of great pieces of content from really great creators. And so that's another way that the token is involved. You meant how the token is used, right? I can give like the numbers if you wanted like the numbers, but I want to talk about like the economy, how it works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's more appropriate.
Okay. So the next way that the token is used is the token is sort of like it's sort of like a vote. So in a decentralized system, one of the problems you run into is problems. There's a couple, but they're problems of basically in a decentralized system, you don't have that point of control. So what happens if people are being abusive? What happens if people are lying? What happens if two different people claim that they're both Forbes, right? What happens if what you know? How do I identify content that's doing well in a decentralized network without someone creating 100,000 fake accounts and all faking it? And again, this is a problem in centralized networks. This is a problem in YouTube. YouTube has fake view, fake trending, fake account. Twitter has fake view, fake all this stuff. There's a big problem, fraudulent activity, right? Google, tons of fake website, all this stuff. So in a decentralized network, you don't even have the ability to be that centralized entity and be like, okay, flag that guy, delete that guy, right? We literally can't do it. That's part of the whole design. So the solution to this problem, it does get a little bit complicated, but it turns out that the token, using it as a staking mechanism, as something like a voting mechanism, okay, yeah, you know what, that guy is the right Forbes. That guy's a joker, or he's, his name is Alan Forbes, but he's not the Forbes. He's some other Forbes. He can still have his account. He can still be at Forbes. He can be, Forbes A or Forbes One or Forbes other things. But Forbes, that's this account over here. So the token is used to resolve these kinds of disputes. It's used as an input to filter out fake content and to figure out what it's used as an input into what's trending and all kinds of other things like this. And so this creates an incentive to sort of hold the token and to use the token and stake it against your favorite creators. I will again emphasize, you don't have to get into this piece of it. If you just want the YouTube experience, ad-free, more respectful, you can come on and get that. If you like the idea of this kind of system of staking and trust, this is also something we're still building. There's some evolutions coming here where we're going to do something that we're tentatively calling Web of Trust staking or something like this. That's going to be coming. So there's some really cool things we think you can do in a decentralized network, and to provide similar user experiences to these centralized services via this sort of tokenization, identity, and staking system. So this is, if you can't tell, this is some of the stuff that I'm actually the most excited to be working on. I think this is some really interesting things that can be done here.
LBRY's really caught on. There's a lot of people that are publishing on it and a lot of people that are promoting it. Could you kind of speak about why you think it's really caught on, and how are people using it as well? So are people abandoning YouTube, or are they kind of using both at the same time?
Yeah, it works. I think that's what it's sad that that's the thing I'm starting with, but that's one of the, it's more of an indictment of a lot of these D apps. It's a big part of it. I think LBRY just works much better than a lot of D apps or even quote unquote YouTube alternatives. I think we've put a lot of time and effort into the product, and we have a long way to go. I want to make it better and better, but I think we have one of the best products in the sort of blockchain Web3 space. Not only best products, but also we've worked hard to get traction and adoption. There are a lot of big YouTubers publishing to LBRY. I mean, there's something like 60, 70 YouTubers with 1 million or more subscribers on YouTube that are publishing to LBRY. You've got huge science creators like Veritasium, 3 Blue 1 Brown. Really big creators are publishing to LBRY, and I think that's another piece of where the success comes from. It also helps that the people who are blockchain industry, like YouTube, has been particularly rough on them, and that's definitely helped with our adoption. We got a big surge in December from that, and it's continued. And also YouTube. I mean, to me, YouTube's behavior, it really has been crazy to me. The truth is, it's been really good for our company. We literally just retweet things that they said, and everyone's like, this is, everyone hates them, and the stuff prioritizing CNN over the people who made YouTube successful. Literally no one wants it. They said out loud no one wants it, and they're doing it. So it's the fact that they're doing stuff like that. That's also helped surge. That's also helping with the adoption, and hopefully we've got something here that's just gonna continue. We considered LBRY.TV to be launched in November, and I think 100,000 people used it in November, and we're gonna cross 3 million people in May.
With the way the last 5 to 6 months have played out, I sort of have rethought what was going on in December with the crypto channels being banned as a kind of dry run for what was to come, where they maybe started censoring more channels. And that's just my idea.
It's definitely, yeah. I'm one of those people who's never attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence, or maybe not never, but look for incompetence first. I think it's more likely that they don't realize what they're doing than that there's some grand plan. Although I don't know. Look at the communist bandits thing, where you couldn't if you posted to YouTube the phrase "communist bandit," the two Chinese characters, your comment would get automatically deleted, right? If those two characters appeared anywhere in the comment at all. Now, YouTube's not even accessible in China. They're an American company, and someone had to code this. Like, you don't accidentally. It's literally only those two characters. It wasn't like there's some bug with like other things. It was like just that phrase. Uh, and then they later say like it was an accident. That's what they always say. Oh, it was an accident. It's an accident that we. It was an accident that we took down the Cointelegraph live stream of consensus. It's just a mistake, and it's like, I mean, I don't know. I guess they're trying to. I actually almost more believe the CoinDesk one was an accident than the Chinese one. Cointelegraph uh, was an accident. But it's tough. It could go either way.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, we don't
It's
know,
not. But
but
it's not. Who cares? Who cares? It's not acceptable. There's no reason for it to be happening. I think that's the more important point. Rather than worrying about whether it was deliberate or an accident, it's stupid. Just stop. Just stop letting it happen. Oh, you asked this earlier, and I wanted to emphasize this actually, and about where the adoption was coming from, how people were using it. Like we, a lot of people publishing to library are staying on YouTube. That's actually, especially for people getting started, our recommendation. We don't ask someone to quit. We say publish to both. Let your audience know you're available on library as well, because YouTube's still going to be a big part of how you're getting new eyeballs. Your audience not going to come over in one video. So we provide tooling that makes it zero effort, zero, literally none. I'm not exaggerating. Zero effort. You don't have to do anything, and you can keep it in sync in either direction. So you can either go YouTube first and have it copied to library. You can go library first and have it copied to YouTube. And our attitude is take the time, build it up over time. We're eager to grow as fast as we can, but like Rome wasn't built in a day. Your audience, as in love with you as they are, isn't going to see the one message, isn't going to whatever. We've had creators try it. It works way better if they spend 6 months, a year, bringing their audience over rather than trying to like get off YouTube overnight.
what role will Web3 and dApps play as more and more people work from home?
It's I think I gave this answer earlier. I think it just accelerates the trend. So I think dApps are competitive with non-D apps, right? So that's the competitor. Like I don't see like even this is how we regard our competition. I'm looking at what YouTube is doing. I'm looking at what Netflix is doing. I'm looking at what Amazon is doing. Like I see myself as competitive with these like major centralized companies. This stuff may change the trends. Again, as I said earlier, it can help. Maybe you try the D app because you're at home and you wouldn't have tried it before. Maybe the market is bigger, right? Maybe there's just weird effects where because people are working at home, YouTube seems to be worse at moderating stuff, and that drives people onto library. Like, I would have never predicted that chain of events in January. That there's going to be a virus that spread across the world, and so therefore YouTubers were going to work from home, which was going to make YouTube worse at blocking content. Therefore, when blockchainers posted their stuff, it was going to get banned. Therefore, they were all going to publish to library, which is going to create. So it's like therefore, like some of this. Sometimes the world is just so crazy in terms of the way that these events, all chain together to cause something to happen. And so it makes me hesitant to predict strongly how any of this is going to play out. Although I think D apps of some this will be nice and vague, so I can't be wrong. Yeah, like D apps of some kind are definitely going to win out in some markets. Look for centralized incumbents that are going to be slow to move or that are being especially abusive, and those kinds of markets are ripe for some kind of D app decentralized solution to come in and disrupt it.
I think, and I might be wrong, people are going to have a more intimate relationship with the internet when they're working from home. They're going to be kind of dialed into their computers more. When I work in an office setting, uh, mostly I've worked from home since like 20, I guess like 12 or 11. But when I work in an office setting, it's a lot more social of an environment. There's a lot more like face-to-face contact, but the vast majority of my working career has been working from home, which means that like the social aspect then is translated into the digital realm. So it's a lot more staring at screens. When all
Yeah.
is said and done, I will have spent like most of my life staring at a screen. So as people begin to work from home increasingly, what do they need to know about library TV, about the library credits, and then generally, dApps and Web3 or just apps in general that can facilitate that. And I know we've gone over that, but we're kind of in conclusion. I'll kind of
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So look, the easier if so, I'll start with if you are actively publishing to YouTube, go to lbry.com/YouTube, click the button, and get your library channel set up. It is dead simple. It is all upside, no downside. There's like no reason not to do it. So if you have a YouTube channel, just go through that process. It's a great way to learn about library. If you're watching stuff on YouTube, okay, go to lbry.tv, or if you want to be a little bit nerdier, go to lbry.com/get and start using a library app. You can also get an app on your phone if you have an Android device. We don't have an iOS app yet. And just try it out. You don't need to do a bunch of reading. You don't need to know a bunch of stuff. We tried to make all the experiences user friendly. You don't have to install MetaMask and click a bunch of weird things. Like, just try it out. Works pretty normal to normal stuff. That's been our goal, to make it work as normally as possible. So just try it out and see if you like it, and earn a little bit of coin for just doing some basic functions. And if you want to keep going further down the rabbit hole, you can come and join our community, library.org. There's a live chat. I'm in there. Thousands of people are in there. And you can follow us we're on the social medias, and type our name in, LBRY. You'll find us no problem. And there's just no reason not to get involved a little bit. Get that account, get a little bit of the coin, and join us for this journey in terms of what we're building and what we're doing. And check out other dApps as well. While I gave a minor dig at MetaMask, MetaMask is some pretty cool software, and MetaMask is also getting better every day. Check out some of the cool dApps. The Ethereum has a number of interesting dApps. I think you can look at a decentralized version of like practically anything that exists and check it out. So I would say, what are the apps that you're the most frustrated about experience-wise? What are the things what are the areas where you think this company or this experience is the worst? And Google that decentralized and see what you can find. It might be worth checking out.
Great, Jeremy. I guess one last question is, what can people use for library credits for those that are not making videos? And then also the last question is, like, businesses, like, what would you say, what was your pitch for a business to create a library TV account? Because in a business, they're going to be a lot more sensitive to like time
Totally.
management.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So if you're the reason to have those tokens is to have a say on the network or to support creators that you like. Okay. We think the library tokens will have value, but we think that value will come from the usage of the tokens on the network and the staking system that exists on the network. Like, we are not trying to compete with library. You'll use your library credits to buy a cup of coffee. We're not playing that game. Okay. We're not in that space. We're trying to compete in this dApp digital content space. So in time, we think those tokens will also only buy more and more things, right? We think we're going to get more video games on there. We're going to get more higher tier, more A titles and so on there. So you can also just hold the coins and get some stuff down the road, right? So that's another reason. Okay. There's another part of the question I was supposed to answer.
So I think businesses, like, what would your value proposition for an enterprise be?
So I guess it depends on how they're using video or text. If they have, a blog that they're maintaining, or they're regularly putting out videos, library is a good place to publish them, particularly if you're interested in, it can be a brand building thing, right? Like being on the frontier of tech, of digital freedom, of respecting users. Like, so associating yourself with the library brand can be positive in that way. So in other words, if you're just currently using video in the sense that you upload it to YouTube and you embed it on your business website, library does that too. And it works the same. And people just care that they click play and they get the video, but you'd be doing it in a way that's a little bit more respectful. And we're not spying on them to the same degree that Google is. Well, we're not really spying on them at all. We log the fact that you viewed it, but we're not sending that data to some advertising partner or anything like that. So it just makes sense to, if you're using video and you can't, I would say at this point, it's got to be because, at least partially because you care about this stuff. We're not gonna, we don't pay a business to start using library, but it's just another place to put your content. There's millions of people using it. If you have video or text that you want people to be seeing, or that you want to be embedding on your website, it's a decent solution for that.
Is there anything else you think we should touch on?
No, I think that was great. It's great. It's great to talk to you about library.
Likewise, thank you so much. We're honored to speak with Jeremy Kauffman today, the CEO of LBRY, which is creating a decentralized market for content and other information. So thank you so much for joining us, Jeremy, and thank you for everyone who listened.
Thanks, Justin.